like most things in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, full cycle. I'm good. Oh, thank you. Well, we've still got a few out there, but we'll go ahead and
Adjusting to
press.
being home.
I'm trying to acclimate to, and part of that acclimation is sleeping in the morning. Because I had a meeting every morning, had to get up for. Or the day out there usually started at 7 and ended at around 6, unless we went late. Because 6 wasn't late.
I think Jason's been on it.
It is nice to have him home. Get used to that too.
Jason's been what?
I think he's on some kind of a run for the last couple of weeks where he's working and then he gets on 6-8 hour long conference calls. Obviously they have breaks.
Yeah, yeah,
With Australia, so that's
yeah.
midnight.
It's
When it ends.
mine were with Israel. I had one 2 weeks ago, I guess. I had one at 6 o'clock in the morning with Israel before I came in here and taught class.
It's always good to have a shot with the Jewish brethren before we
I
come
want
to
to know
church.
what sleeping in is. Is it 8?
No, sleeping in has gotten to be what, 9:30, Susan? 10 o'clock?
Oh,
That was sleeping in.
That is sleeping.
Yeah, that's sleeping
sleeping
in.
in for me
Go
is
to bed kind of late.
Yeah, we're going to bed late too. Yeah, you shift your schedule a little bit.
I don't go to bed early, but 7:30 or 8's about my time.
Okay, we're in the kingdom, and we're in the inevitable book that you would get into when you talk about the kingdom today, which is John's prophecy in the kingdom, which would be which book? Revelation. Just singular, not revelations. Some people say that. It's revelation. Singular. It goes on, but it's a single revelation. So, this is the third part, and this will probably get us into the fourth part pretty quickly. I'm not sure how many weeks we'll spend. I'm trying not to make this a study of Revelation, but I'm going to cover a lot, and I think Doug's going to cover a lot when we talk about it. And there's going to be some areas where we kind of touch on it lightly, and some areas we don't touch on at all, probably, because the focus is kingdom, not on everything in the book of Revelation. So, I jumped to chapter 5. I'm not going to stay there, but I jumped to chapter 5 to start with. So, then I saw on the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept because no one was found who's worthy to open the scroll or to look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." So who's sitting on the throne? God. God the Father. Okay, so what does the scroll represent? What is it? Did I get the hard question right away? The scroll and the seals?
Is the scroll the word, which is the same as the Son, or is the scroll the list of the names?
Get back to that. But you know, it never really, if you read through, it talks about the little book, but it never says what's in the scroll. I looked. I looked hard. I went through most of the book. And it talks, and I thought maybe it was a little book, but the little book is something else and it gets eaten. So it never really talks about the scrolls. But what do the seals represent on the scroll that seal the scroll? Huh? You said something, Wanda. I'm sitting close to my ear.
I didn't finish it.
Didn't finish it. Okay. Remember, there's 7 seals on it. There's, however they sealed them, but they sealed them that time with wax usually, and then they put a stamp on it and all that other stuff.
Isn't that the original churches?
Huh?
Isn't that the churches, the original churches, or no?
No. No, it isn't. To me, the scroll and the seals, particularly the seals, are the unfolding of time, of the future, of things that are going to happen. And we'll get back to that. So, who is described that can break the seals and open the scroll? Jesus. Okay. That's a pretty specific description of who Jesus is. So, then I saw a lamb, looking as it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits God sent out into all the earth. And I'm going to come back to the spirits in a minute, but what do the 7 horns represent? There's 7 is, what does 7 stand for in the Bible? Completeness.
It's kind of God in.
What does a horn represent? Power. All complete power. Jesus has all power, complete power. Eyes. What do 7 eyes represent? All seeing. He can see into everybody's hearts. He knows what motivates you. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, it talks about what's the most important thing that you have to have. Your heart. Love for God. He can see everything. So, the Lamb, the 7 horns, 7 eyes. Christ, he has been given all power, and he sees all things. Where specifically were the 7 spirits sent? And this is where Mickey was talking about it. Well, let's go back to that. To the earth, yeah, but it says all the earth. But they had specific areas they were sent to. So, we'll go back to chapter, I said I wasn't going to stay in 5. I'm back in 1. To the 7 churches in the province of Asia, grace and peace to you from him who was, who is, and who was, and who is to come, and from the 7 spirits before his throne. So there's the 7 spirits again. And from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth. So where are the 7 spirits at this particular point, and what are they to do? This is the easy part. Where are they at right now? Before they were sent out.
Before the throne.
Before the throne. It's grace and peace to you from him who is, and who was, and who is to come, and from the 7 spirits before his throne. Who's on the throne? The Father. These are his 7 spirits. And then it has, and from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth. So it's from both of them. But the spirits are sent out by the Father and the Son. Write, therefore, what you have seen, what is now, and what will take place later. So now he's going to say, okay, this is the future. You need to see what you see. The mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. So he's about to get into the 7 churches that he's sending out the 7 spirits to. And remember, that 7, there's a reason that 7's there, and I want to explore that a little bit. So, who are the 7 spirits going to visit? Well, they're going to visit the churches. The angels are at the churches, but you're going to visit the churches. So, this is a map that kind of zeroes it in, and it will get better. We're going to focus on this island here, Patmos. Patmos is off the coast of Turkey, and it's not a big island. You notice to the left of it is Greece. Were many letters written to the people that were in Greece? Oh, yeah. Colossae, Corinth, Thessalonica. So you had all these letters that were, well, guess what? That's not one of the 7 churches, is it? Because that would be over on the left. It's in the Aegean Sea. That's a real famous question on Jeopardy, so remember where the Aegean Sea is if you watch Jeopardy. But you've got Asia, and you've got Patmos, and those white stars there are where the 7 churches are. You can also see in Sicilia, you can see Galatia over to the right a little bit of it. You can see Syria, just a little bit of it. And south of Syria is Jerusalem. Were there churches there? Oh, yeah. Big churches. Antioch was a huge church. Antioch was a megalopolis, okay? It was a huge city in the time of the Roman Empire, just like Rome. It's a monster. But he focused in on these churches. So let's look at it a little bit closer. There was Pergamum, Thyatira, Smyrna, Sardis, Philadelphia, Ephesus, and Laodicea. Why do you think it would be those 7 churches? He sent the spirits into all the earth, but there's 7 churches. John's on Patmos. John's writing this book. Ephesus, Smyrna, and Pergamum are all port cities. How did they move commerce around? What was the most efficient way to do it? A boat. Were people likely to come in and eventually, he'd hear what was going on Patmos? I mean, he's been banished. He's been exiled to Patmos. He can't leave. John can't leave. John's in his 90s probably at this particular point. And he's going to hear. What's he going to hear? Which churches is he going to hear most about? Probably those. But I think there's another reason why they chose those 7 churches. This is what Patmos looks like. It's pretty mountainous. You notice in the middle of it, it says Monastery of St. John the Theologian. So that's kind of a nod probably to where they thought John lived and died on the Isle of Patmos. But it's about 5 miles long and about 2.5 miles wide at its widest point. So it's a pretty small island that he's been banished to. But that's where he is. That's where he's seeing this vision. And people come in and out of Patmos from those 7 churches. But I don't think that's the whole thing. So, what are the merits and challenges for the 7 churches? And if you guys want to crack your books open to help with answering these, if you don't have them off the top of your head, you can go to Ephesus, chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. I'm going to be in chapter 2, and I think in chapter 3. But I'm going to look at each of these 7 churches and see if we can kind of figure out, why did he pick these 7 churches? Why did he pick 7 churches? So in my merits and challenges, merits are things they're doing good, things they're doing right. Challenges are things that are going to challenge that particular church. And it may be difficulty, it may be things they're doing wrong. It could be either. So those are the things that we're going to talk about on the 7 churches. Maybe with knowing that, we can kind of correlate it to say, okay, maybe this is why he chose those 7 churches. And I'm going to go accentuate the focus on, good morning, on what those 7 churches were. So the merits: hard workers, persevering, intolerant of wicked people. Okay, so that's kind of a synopsis. I wanted to keep it short and sweet as far as what they did in Ephesus. If you look at it, that's kind of what they said about their merits were. Now, and when each one of these, when he introduces it into the church, he says, I see all that you do, which kind of goes back to the 7 eyes, doesn't it? When we talk about Christ, he can see everything completely. But what was the challenges for Ephesus? Yeah. They've forsaken their first love. What would that be? Yeah, a little bit more expansive than that. They were hard-working, they were persevering, they were intolerant of wicked people, but they left their first. What would that love be? Huh? Why would they do that? What kind of a church would we call that today?
Country club.
Huh?
Country club.
Well, they're hard. They're very, very strong. They're looking at what's written in there, and they're saying, everybody, you got to do what it says. You got to follow all the commandments. You got to do everything right. What is that kind of church today?
Legalistic.
It's legalistic. They're not doing it because they love God. They're doing it because they can follow the rules. We're going to enforce the rules. We're going to make sure people don't go off of what they need to do, which is a merit, okay, that they're zealous for the word. But that's their whole mission, is to make sure everybody does stuff right. And he says, you lost your first love. You're not doing it for me.
Yeah, there's no outreach to the unwashed. There's no outreach with the gospel of love and mercy to balance that out.
Yeah. They're not doing it. They're not doing it because I want to serve God. They're doing it because they want to be right. How about Smyrna? Not New Smyrna, because that's up north of us. Smyrna. What do you think their merits were? 8 through 11. There's only 3 verses. It's not that much. It's 7 verses, the other one. 4 verses. I'm not going to get very far today. How about they're suffering for Christ. They're faithful unto death. And it says they're rich. How are they rich? Spiritually, okay? These people are in poverty, okay? They're persecuted, they're poor, but they're really strong in the faith. And they're persevering. What's their challenge? Remember, I didn't say challenge is what they're doing wrong necessarily, but what's their challenge?
It says in verse 10 that they're going to be tested.
Yep. They're going to suffer. The suffering's not going to stop. It's going to continue. So that's their challenge, is to stay true to God, even though they're going to continue to suffer. Remember, this is 7 churches. There's something to that. How about Pergamum? That's 5 verses. What's their merits? Those colors come out very good on there. Okay. It's really good on here. How about, you're reading through, they remain faithful to Jesus, they don't renounce his name, and it's a pretty evil place. He says this is where Satan's throne is. And you're remaining faithful. You don't renounce his name. But what is their challenge? Yeah. They brought in sexual perversion, promiscuity, that's part of idol worship. That's not acceptable from God. They're getting influence from the Nicolaitans and Balaams. These are people who are looking to serve idols, and they brought in a lot of the sexual part of it into the worship. And they've really pushed that one. So their challenge is bringing in things of the world into the church. They've let it in. Okay, they've let it influence how they follow Christ. They've mixed the two. Okay, they brought in the world, and they're still trying to serve Christ. So there's a balance there, but he's saying, you need to get rid of this part that you have, that you've let in, that you said is acceptable to God, because the influence of both of those particular groups, the Nicolaitans and the Balaams, is to some extent not Gnosticism, where it says, well, your body's separate and everything like that. You have a spiritual part and you have a physical part, and you can do whatever you want to with the physical part, because Christ came for the spiritual part, which is wrong. But it's what's crept in. Okay, it's the world that's allowed to creep in and pollute what was the purity of what Christ taught when he was here. Let's look at the fourth one. Thyatira. What are their merits? (18 through 29). That's a lot to read and digest. But I came up. They're loving, they're faithful, they serve and persevere. And it's interesting the way he put it. And they do now more than they did at first. Well, I would hope so. Yeah, you do more than you did. But they got a woman who claims to be a prophet. She's brought in sexual promiscuity as acceptable to God. They've allowed, again, the world to influence their righteousness. How about Sardis? That's 7 verses. 1 through 6. Anybody want to bring me their merits? Huh?
They had gods in lukewarm.
No, it's
They were alive, but now you are dead.
yeah. They have some that are still faithful. That's the positive part in Sardis. But not many. They don't finish anything. It says they're dead in their faith. They're just kind of going through the motions. It's not legalism, but it's no passion. There's nothing driving them to do anything. The one that's lukewarm is going to be the last one we get to. But this is similar. They have unfinished deeds. Now, whatever they started, they don't finish. We used to call it follow through. In sports, we call it finishing the game. Okay, what happens when you don't finish the game? You lose. You usually lose. Okay? And what he's saying here is, you guys, there's a few of you that are living faith, but most of you are just going through the motions. How about Philadelphia? That's 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 or 7 verses. Let's just scan that one.
They kept his word and have not denied his name.
Right? Kept Christ's commandments, their loving deeds, they don't deny Jesus, they endure patiently. All pluses at Philadelphia. The challenge is enduring and keeping in the faith of Jesus. So not really doing anything wrong, but that's their challenge, is enduring in the faith, continuing in the faith, growing in the faith. And the last one, Laodicea. What's a merit of Laodicea? I looked hard at that one. You know what I found? None.
At least they're not cold.
None.
Well, yeah, even the lukewarm, worse than being cold.
Yet their challenge is they're lukewarm. They're not hot, they're not cold. They're not against Christ, they're not for Christ. They just, they don't care. What do the problems with these 7 churches represent? They not cover all the problems the churches are going to have from now on. You're going to have legalism. You're going to have the world that's going to creep into it. People are going to, I don't care. And some people are going to be doing well, but they're going to have to endure in the faith. Isn't it kind of saying, this is representative of what's going to happen to all churches? It's not just these 7 churches. It's representative of what's going to happen to churches. Remember, Revelation is a lot of images to represent things, because in the beginning of chapter 1 it says, and he sent the spirits out into all the earth. Well, those 7 churches aren't all the churches. We already went through those. He didn't go to Colossae, didn't go to Antioch, didn't go to Jerusalem, didn't go to Thessalonica, didn't go to Colossae, didn't go to any of those. They had gone to Laodicea, by the way. But these churches represent the kind of problems the churches are going to have over the centuries. And I think that's what he's trying to say. That's what he sees, is these 7 seals that are opened up are also going to accentuate the problems that are going to happen to everybody in the world. And they're going to look at things and they're going to go, whoa, that must be this. And it's like, maybe not. So I think I get to this one. This is the scrolls. So I think part of it is those are the 7 churches that are closest to Patmos. But I think it's bigger than that. I think it's representative of the church and the challenges that the church is going to have over the millenniums that it exists. So going on back to the seals. So it takes me back to 5, because I wanted to go back to that one and talk about what the 7 spirits were. The 7 spirits went out to see what's going to happen to the church. And those 7 churches were representative of what's going to happen in the church, in his church over time. Things are good, some things are not so good. He went out and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp. They were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. And they sang a new song, saying, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain. And with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth." And I underlined that for bringing it back to kingdom. Okay, we were created to be that kingdom. So, who's encircling the throne singing, "You are worthy to take the scrolls," blah, 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 blah. There's a reason I'm asking this question, because
4 creatures and the 24 elders.
yeah, it's the 4 creatures, which are weird-looking creatures, and the 24 elders. And I could get into the 24 elders, but I'm not going to. You could say it could represent the 12 tribes and represent the 12 apostles, but that's a whole different discussion. But the ones that are singing this now are singing a new song, and they're singing to say, wow, we now have someone who can open the scroll. We now have someone who can open each of those seals that seal up the scroll. And it's the 24 elders, and it's the 4 creatures. So this is immediately around the throne. So there's God, there's Christ, there's the 24, and the 4 creatures. Whether it physically exists like that, we don't know, but that's what we can understand. That's how John explained it. What did Christ's blood do? Didn't he purchase us? He paid for us. He paid the price for us. So what do the people of every tribe and language comprise with Christ? This is easy. The kingdom. We are the kingdom with him. How are we priests? Because it says here, be a kingdom and priests to serve our God. How are we priests? I can't hear you, Wanda. We become priests when we become his. But how are we priests? You answered when. How? Huh? How about here out of 1 Peter? As you come to him, the living stone rejected by humans but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices, acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. And that's verse 4 and 5. I jumped down to 9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, now you are a people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. In verse 5 is where I think the focus is. Did I ask that question? So in what way are we priests? And looking at verse 5.
Says we offer spiritual sacrifices.
Yeah. We're living stones. You know, it refers to the first verse 4, as Christ as the stone. And Matt's teaching class about that on Wednesday night. But here it says, he's the stone, he's the cornerstone. But you need stones to build the rest of the building, which is the kingdom. We're those stones. We're living stones. We don't die. He died. We don't die. We're living stones. We offer spiritual sacrifices. What are those? What would those spiritual sacrifices be? Wouldn't it be we give up our own preferences, desires, and say, I'm not going to serve me, I'm going to serve him. I'm going to love my brother, I'm going to love my sister, I'm going to love God. I'm going to do those things that put them above me. Those are spiritual sacrifices. That's what living stones do. That's what we sacrifice, is ourselves and our own desires for him. And as that, we're a priest. Because we're offering that up to God. That was the problem in Ephesus. What they were doing was, they were doing some of those things, but they weren't sacrificing for God. They were sacrificing to say, look how righteous I am. Okay, look how good I am. Look how much I'm serving you, God. Which kind of get in the same trap the Pharisees were in, doesn't it?
Kind of goes along with Romans 12, verse 1 and 2. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercy of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. I've also seen it as a spiritual sacrifice. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, and what is acceptable and perfect. So it's all part of what you say.
Yeah, I almost pulled that out of Romans, but I said, I like what's in Peter too. But it's the same thought. It's, you know, Paul and Peter had the same thought. Paul went at it a little bit differently, but they had the same thought. We are living stones. We are the priesthood that John's talking about in Revelation, that we're offering up sacrifices. Those sacrifices are spiritual sacrifices. We're living sacrifices. You know, everything that we do and everything that we don't do is for God and not for ourselves. And when we slip and fall and we say, I'm going to do something for me and I don't care about God, that's when God picks us up. That's when he cleanses us. And it happens every day. Well, it happens every day for me. I don't know about you. So, back to chapter 5. I'm trudging through this one. Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. In a loud voice, they were saying, "Worthy is the Lamb who is slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise." So who's encircling the throne saying, "Worthy is the Lamb"? Huh? Who's saying this at this particular point? Remember, the last one, it was the 24 elders and the 4 creatures. Now it's all the angels, which to me is almost a little bit of pandemonium because they aren't singing the same thing. But that's what he's hearing from all the angels, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of angels that are all encircling the throne. So you've got the center part, but now you've got all these angels. That probably encompasses heaven with all these angels that are singing this one. What did they say the Lamb was worthy to receive? Power, wealth, wisdom, strength, honor, glory, praise. Where was he to use it? Yep. Where were they to use it? Where was he to use those, in this case, 7 things? Where was he to use this? I didn't put praise on there. In his kingdom. That's what he was equipped to do. Those things. He has all his power. His wealth is the richness that he has because he's of God. His wisdom, his strength, his honor, his glory, his praise. All those things are for his to be king of his kingdom. Back to kingdom again. The next part, 13 through 14. Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them, saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever." The 4 living creatures said amen, and the elders fell down and worshiped. So who's this? Everywhere else. All throughout the creation and heaven. And it's every creature, which I thought was kind of interesting. They're all singing praise to Christ. Because what? Where did this start? With the scroll and the 7 seals. Who had the power to open up the seals? Christ. What justified him being able to open the seals? His death and resurrection. So this is celebrating the beginning of the kingdom. And the opening of the seals is going to talk about what's going to be happening when the kingdom's open, which is what chapter 6 is about. So let's go to 6. Let's see how far we get in 6 minutes. Not very far. I watched the Lamb open the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown. And he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. So, who does this seal bring to the world? The Lord. Jesus. So who's on the white horse? Kind of the same thing. Jesus. Thought it went closer to that. Okay. So you have this seal. It brings Jesus, but it also brings the gospel to the whole world. This one here, everybody kind of looks at it and says, yeah, I kind of know what that is. But do you know what really explains who this is? Better? In 19, I saw a heaven standing open. There before me was a white horse, whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. He is dressed in a robe, dipped in blood, and his name is the Word of God. It's getting pretty obvious who it is. The armies of heavens were following him, riding on the white horses and dressed in fine linen, white and clean. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh, he has this name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So there's more of an explanation who's on the white horse in 19. In 19, at this particular point, what the horse is doing is a little bit different than what it is in 5. Because 5 is signifying the beginning of the kingdom. And in 19, it's coming out to really talk about what's happened in the kingdom and getting ready for judgment. So that's clear. In Hebrews, and I wanted to go back to look at this one. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. What is that? The Word of God. Okay. How does it strike down the nations? The truth. For the Word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword, and piercing as far as division of soul and spirit, both of joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. And remember, we went back to those 7 churches, and the intentions and the thoughts of the heart is one of the areas that was a big challenge for a couple of those churches, wasn't it? They were doing it because it was the rules, or they were doing it because we just go through the motion. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, the 7 eyes. He sees everything. And all things are open and laid bare to the eyes of him with whom we have to do. So the Hebrew writer was talking about Christ here. It's very plain what he was talking about Christ. So you can kind of see you have to reconcile with what you interpret in Revelation with the other epistles in the book to make sure you got it right. Because if it doesn't complement each other, if it conflicts, you probably ought to go back and study it and look at it again. And what my technique I've used here is I've looked at some of this, and where I can pull something in from the other part of the Bible, in the epistles, or what Christ said in the Gospels, I pull it in. Let's see. So in Revelation, and I think that's the last one I'm going to get to. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. So what does this seal bring to the creation?
What does it represent?
What does it bring? Yeah. War. This one here is war. It's a large sword. It is people fighting with each other.
That's the enemy.
The enemy, it could be the enemy of God. It could be the enemies between two different people that are, neither one of them are of God. It could be between people of God and people who are not of God. But it's war. It is strife. It is conflict.
Could it be Satan?
Some of it could be, but some of it is of our own design, our own desires, and it's evil. It's what Satan would sit there and he'd applaud for, but it isn't necessarily him driving it. You know, people have free choice. People make choices all the time to say, I'm going to go down this path as opposed to Christ's path. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come," and I looked, and before me there was a black horse. Its horse was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. And I think that's the last one I'll get to. I'll stop here. What does this one bring to the creation? What? This is famine. 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages. Well, that's pretty high because there isn't enough wheat. There is 6 pounds for barley. Barley's not that good anyhow. And do not damage the oil and the wine. Why? Because you have so little of it. So this is famine. I'm going to stop here and I'll let Doug pick up. I've got 8 more slides, so you can kind of get a jump off on that one. But we're going to go through the seals, and then I don't know what area we'll jump to next, but we can talk about it, Doug. But thanks for your attention. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus.